Well, hey, everybody. It's the Cryptid Huntress. I'm Jessica Jones. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Welcome to A Glitch in the Matrix. Man, we have a fantastic show today. I have my very good friend, Dennis Carroll, in the studio today, and we're going to be talking about the Cynocephaly. Okay, and I know I've had several people asking me recently about the history of dogmen and where do they come from, how long have they been around, and so today we're going to cover kind of a world history of the Cynocephaly or the dog-headed men and women all over the world. It's not just here in the United States. I know today we get reports of dogmen, a lot of dogmen and werewolf sightings. Well, they go way back, y'all, way back. And so we're prepared to talk about that today. So you guys buckle up, get your popcorn, like I always say, and get ready for a fantastic conversation today. Now, I do have a website. If you guys would like to follow along with all of my work, please go check out my website. That's thecryptidhuntress.com. You can find all of my shows there, all of my links to my social media. Everything's there on that website. Also, if you'd like to support my work, I do have a Patreon. Ooh, and I just ordered some really great bumper stickers and stuff for my Patreon members. By the way, there's a couple of you guys that I don't have that are VIP Patreon members. I don't have your mailing address. Please send me your mailing address today. Go to send it to the Cryptid Huntress at gmail.com. Okay. So I can mail out your VIP Patreon gifts. Okay. I'm doing that today. So please send me your address if you're a VIP Patreon member and if I don't have it. Okay. Thank you so much. But become a member of my Patreon. And yes, my VIP members do get a gift every month. Okay. So, and it comes from my shop and it's usually the Cryptid Huntress merch of some sort. Okay. So, and I will be putting some of those bumper stickers and stuff up for sale as soon as I get them in. I can't wait. Okay. They're going to be badass. Okay. So, also I do have a shop that's called War Woman Goods. It's over on Etsy. You guys go check out the goods. I do sell vintage Native American turquoise jewelry and other stuff over there. So, please go check that out. And thank you so much for your support, you guys. I want to thank all my channel members, all my moderators. We do have a channel membership as well. If you guys want to join, just hit that join button. Okay. And I know Dr. Dennis Carroll, who's in the chat in the studio today, he has a channel membership as well on his channel. It's called Hunting the Shadows. Please go over there and subscribe to his channel as well and become a member of his channel. All right. And yes, I can't wait he's got a great show coming up tonight, y'all. We're going to be promoting his show. He's going to be talking vampires with some vampire royalty. Okay. And so stay tuned for that. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get our show, shall we? Okay. Thank y'all so much for being here today. All right. There are many tales of dog-headed men or cynocephaly from across the world stemming from many centuries ago. Cynocephaly are creatures with the head of a dog or a jackal in the body of a human. China, India, Egypt, Greece, the Caribbean, and medieval Europe all have stories of cynocephaly in their myths and legends. There are also dog-headed men shown on old world maps, like is it called the Piri Reis map as well. So they're shown on historical records from St. Christopher. Even King Arthur had a battle with a big group of dog-headed men near Edinburgh. But there's so many more tales. And today we're going to get deep into this topic. We're going to go all around the world today and look at and discuss all the different tribes and communities and islands and continents of dog-headed men. And to help me do that today, I have my very good friend, Dr. Dennis Carroll, here in the studio today. And Dr. Dennis Carroll has many years of paranormal experience. He's my go-to for all things occult, demonology, cryptids, UFOs, you name it. Please help me welcome to the show, Dr. Dennis Carroll.
Hey, Dennis. Afternoon. Hope everyone's doing okay today. It's this is a very interesting subject, absolutely, Jessica. And when I hear the term dogman or dog-headed beings, I kind of think that, one actual explanation for dog-headedness is stubbornness. Okay, it's kind of being set in your way. That's a kind of a dog head thing. And that used to be another typical expression for it, like bullheaded. I can think of some politicians like that, but I won't call any names. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about there. We're talking about actual dog-headed people here that actually have the body of humans and the heads of dogs. And this is very prevalent throughout time and history in almost every part of the world. It's another one of those strange paranormal paradoxes, I call them. It's in almost every culture that you run into this. Now, there's been a lot of speculation, and I'll say this before we get into the subject today, that some people have misconstrued dog-headed people as being apes, like baboons and stuff like that. And I could kind of see that, But here's an interesting thing you got to think about. These people knew what dogs were. Okay, they've had dogs for centuries upon century. I just don't see them misconstruing a dog for an ape in that way. That doesn't seem likely. But stranger things have happened. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think there's any kind of way through all the research that I've done. I don't think there's any way that these dog-headed men would be mistaken as, or primates could have been mistaken as these dog-headed men. I mean, they're very specific in a lot of the records. Okay. And they go way back all the way. I mean, first of all, we had the ancient Egyptians that talked about, that had Anubis as the god of the underworld. He weighed people at the time of death and weighed their hearts, I guess, or, and he was a protector of the dead, basically. Okay. But we also had very famous explorers from all over the world. I think one of the first known accounts was back in around 400 BC. The Greek, I believe he was an author. He was a writer of some sort. Theseus, I believe. I've talked about him before. He wrote about the dog-headed men of the mountains in India. Okay. And because India had a big population of dog-headed men, it was very specific. They described them to a T as being like dogs, like they were a human body with a dog head. It's like human hands and stuff, because they were actually traders. Okay. Like they traded, they sold spices. They were organized like a community. Okay. And they had their own language. They didn't speak in a particular tongue.
They actually supposedly wore skins too, and could not talk, but could bark and howl, but yet could understand language. According to that, this was the big report from the Greeks. As a matter of fact, that's where the word Cynocephaly comes from. It's a Greek word. It simply means dog head. But you have to wonder at the almost very adequate description of something like that they would put in the fact that they wore skins, they lived in the mountains, they traded with other regular people. They were like a tribe unto themselves, you might say, or a race, definitely, in that description. And that's very strange that they would be. And even, Jessica, Marco Polo talked about these things. Marco Polo mentioned some of this. And, he was a big world traveler, and he was very accurate in his descriptions and records that he made of his travels. So you have to wonder about that, too.
Oh yeah, I actually have some of the ways that Marco Polo described them in my notes today. So he was actually talking about that. I think it's called the Andaman Islands or something. I think it's something similar to that. And if I'm not mistaken, it's somewhere off the coast of India. It's not too far from India, I believe. And he said they were cruel. They ate everything they could catch, including humans. Their diet consisted of milk, rice, and flesh. He said that anyone they could catch, including their own, were fair game for them to eat. So they were known to be basically what you would call cannibals. I guess they were cannibals, but they would sell spices. They had fruits and things on that they would sell that were unlike anything else in the entire world. But they looked like mastiff dogs. They had a dog head that looked like a mastiff and the body of a human.
Yeah, that's a very plain description. Like I said, these people knew what dogs were. Okay, and here's the interesting history. Just a side note on the history of dogs in this world. you talk, a lot of people, and I've talked with people about hybrids, and there is a history of hybridness in mankind throughout almost every region. You have these stories of the chimeras that look like different things and all that, and then you have, the Egyptian gods with a different head, animal heads, and the bodies of humans. You got this hybrid thing that's been going on for centuries upon centuries. And that's an interesting note when you think about it. But look at the history of dogs. The dogs that we have right now, we made them. We created them in many aspects. Maybe not from scratch, but we are the proprietors of that because we bred them to do different jobs, different hunting dogs, dogs that herd cattle. That's where you get the bulldog from. The list goes on and on. So these people knew dogs inside and out. Okay, they knew what they were talking about when they talked about dogs. And the dog has always been a companion to man for untold centuries. So that was the only and to actually run into something that had the attributes of a dog, especially like the head of a dog, you're gonna know immediately, hey, that's what that is. It's nothing that you're gonna misconstrue. And that's why I say what's going on with that, because so much of this is going on in so many different cultures and all that. It's very, very strange that this keeps popping up. And here's another thing: the Romans talked about dog-headed people. Okay. And it's thought that they may have also, and we got to look at it this way too, they could have also been talking about the Norse or the Viking peoples. And we know about the berserkers. They wore the bear skins and became bears on the battlefield, per se. But you also had the Ulfandar. The Ulfandar, they became wolves. They wore the skin of wolves. They painted themselves black. They wore the skin of wolves over them. They became wolves. Almost, that's where you get the werewolf thing going on too a lot. So the Romans were scared of these guys. I mean, these were very bad dudes to run into, and they called them kind of dog-headed. They called them, and that was their term for barbarians, dog-headed people or wolf-headed people, whatever the situation was. That's an interesting. So it was a racial thing for them in that respect.
Wow. Well, okay. So I from what I was researching, it seems as though before Christopher Columbus started putting out the information about his encounters with the dog-headed people, because he was actually saying they were very barbaric. Okay. And he was referring to the ones in the Caribbean and some of them that he had encountered in the islands. But before that, most of the accounts of them weren't, not most, but well, I guess the majority of them, people said that they were actually not savage. Like they weren't that savage. They weren't out to, get you, that you could actually trade with them. And they did not have a language, but they would bark, and they used hand gestures, like sign language kind of to get their message out to whoever they were talking to. But they were more peaceful, or they were seen as more kind of peaceful, but they would eat you. Okay. But they seemed to be more peaceful before Christopher Columbus put out about how barbaric they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, here's another thing. Hernando Cortez was ordered by the King of Spain to find these dog-headed people in his travels, to keep an eye out for them, because the king wanted to know about them. So like I say, this was known all over the world. And that's the interesting aspect of all this, Jessica. The ancient peoples knew this well, and there was something going on with that. They didn't have investigative researchers back then like you and I and some of these other people. We've dug this stuff up. This was something well known to these peoples. Okay, and it was part of their existence. They took this for fact that there were dog-headed people out there.
Oh yeah, this was not a myth. There was no mythology about these things back then. It was absolute fact. Okay, it was fact, and it was. I mean, it's shown on is it called the Piri Reis map? Piri Reis. I can't pronounce it. This map, it was actually based off of Christopher Columbus's maps. This is from 1513. And on the top of part of this map, I think it was in the north part of South America, they do show dog-headed men on this map. Okay, dog-headed men. And they do say that Christopher Columbus did encounter dog-headed men in the Caribbean.
I think if you look at that map very closely, that dog man is fighting with an ape.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's kind of strange, but that's a fascinating map, by the way. I've studied it for hours on end. It has some interesting things about it, absolutely, and some other maps too. I think there are a lot of clues to the old world and to things that happened back in those days with these old maps, because they were trying to be, although I know that they had, they didn't have the information we have today and all that, of course, but they were trying to be as accurate as absolutely possible. And that's like that old thing on the maps, don't go past this point. Beyond here, there be dragons. They didn't know what lied beyond that aspect of the map that they were doing. So but that reminds me of my saying, one of my favorite sayings, that myths can be a warning and legends are true. And you have to wonder about that definitely with some of this stuff, because so many people knew about it. And it was just like, to me, it was almost like it was part of their historical record that they would put forth. Just like we would write our history books, they would write that stuff down as their historical record. And so you have to wonder when you see stuff like that, Jessica, where did that come from? Me, I'm always saying you got to look for the origin of something. And you got to wonder, where did this come from?
Yeah. Well, it appears that dog-headed men have been around a lot longer than I would even have thought. Okay. And I know I've been looking at maps a lot lately. I had Carroll and Jane on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the old world maps and ancient maps that were showing these strange creatures all over the world. But back then they weren't so strange, like these dragons and the unicorns and the blemmies. I love the blemmies. That's one of my favorites. But the dog-headed men, that's a big one. Okay. And so I wanted to show, speaking of maps, I just had a picture of, this is Marco Polo, and this is kind of where he had traveled through China and across, Europe. So he's just to show we're all, this is part of the places that he went, where he was encountering dog-headed men. Okay. And very famous. Now, the Greeks, I didn't mention the Greeks earlier, and there were several different people who wrote about the dog-headed men. I do want to read this one passage. I thought it was interesting. And this is from the Greek writer Claudius Aelianus. I think is how you say his name. He says, the Cynocephali, as they are called, a name which they owe to their physical appearance and nature. For the rest, they are of human shape and go about clothed in the skin of beast. They are upright and injure no man. Mm-hmm. And though they have no speech, they howl, yet they understand the Indian language. So that's super interesting, right? Because you had mentioned that they wear, furs and things like that, but they actually could understand the Indian language, but they couldn't speak it because I don't guess their mouths were able to speak that language. They had dog heads. Okay, I've seen videos of dogs saying "I love you," but it doesn't, it's in a bark. Okay, so that's kind of how they were talking.
Well, they even have just a note on this. They even have discovered that chimpanzees can almost talk. I mean, they almost have a human-like speech. It's not that far-fetched. Absolutely not, that these things can do that, especially when they hear sounds and mimic sounds. Absolutely. Just like parakeets. I've heard some parakeets that could talk better than some people could. It's amazing what animals can do. But, we need to kind of stop a minute, though, and tell everybody out there listening that we're not talking about the regular dog men that we've talked about before. They have hair all over their body. These folks are described as having the head of a dog, but the body of a person. And they had to wear skins, clothes, and all that. That's the interesting difference here between that and the dog man that we've talked about so much out in the woods that people see. That's an interesting. That's what is so fascinating about this to me. You got that hybrid thing going on here. To me, that's very interesting, and that's like with the Egyptian god Anubis. Now, Anubis, of course, is the funerary god. He is the god of the dead. He leads the dead to the afterlife. He has the head of a jackal, but the body of a man. Okay, he has the body of the man. All the Egyptian gods do that. You've got the crocodile-headed god. You've got the lion-headed. That's a female god, a goddess. The list goes on and on. But every one of them, they have the body of a person. And the Egyptians believed that these gods could, at any moment, turn completely into that animal. Be like you see that picture there. Could be a jackal completely, or they could go into a human form. But the reason they depicted them as being that hybrid is to show both forms at one time, to show that they actually had that head of the jackal and the body of a man. That's an interesting thing. Now, there was a cult of Anubis that said that there were certain people who, according to certain magical rites and incantations, who were the followers and worshippers of Anubis, could also turn into the very same thing that Anubis was. They could be jackal-headed people. And these certain amulets, and I think the Book of Thoth was involved. I don't know if you're familiar with the Egyptian Book of Thoth. That's thought to have some of the most interesting arcane knowledge in the world in that book. That's the book that you, by the way, that you see in the Mummy movies that brings the mummy back to life. The words that are read out of it. It is thought that using the Book of Thoth and amulets and incantations, they could change into Anubis on Earth. They would have the head of jackals, but yet the bodies of people. And his servant supposedly could do that through black magic. Interesting stuff.
Very interesting. That's so cool. I was talking about the magic, and we're talking about the cube magic when I was talking with Caleb Jade. I'm not sure if he's in the chat today, but we were talking about, I mean, Anubis was magic. Okay, he was magic. A lot of these cryptids are magic, and I'm not saying he was a cryptid, but I guess he is. Okay, some looked at he was revered as a god. Okay, but yeah, the shape shifting, showing powers. Wow, they're okay. So you're bringing another element into it too. They're not just regular dog-headed men. A lot of them could have been shapeshifters as well. Just like we see today, we've got the Dogman reports that we're getting, and then we're also getting werewolf reports, and those werewolves are shapeshifters. Okay, so even today, we're still having the same reports, and people are seeing the same things that they were seeing centuries and centuries ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of times, people don't realize this, like we've talked about before, shape-shifting is a premier supernatural power. And people wanted that. They wanted that because they could change their very reality with it. Who wouldn't like to maybe turn into a bird, fly off if they wanted to, or turn into a wolf and eat your enemies up, or whatever the situation. That was what they were looking for. And that was a big part of their magical thing, that they were trying to achieve. Some people were. Although they were doing it, man. I'm gonna mention this today, and we'll have to talk about it some other time. But have you ever heard of the cult of the Black Cube?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing too. That reminded me of that when you said cube. But you've got stuff like that went on as well. But these people were trying to change their realities, and to be the reality of their gods too. A lot of times. And like we said before, and I won't get into that because that's a giant thing, but all these gods were depicted, most everyone, as giant, extraordinary creatures. And of course, the more extraordinary you could have if you had an animal head or you were part animal, that would be very impressive too, I imagine. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of them being gigantic, okay, because we've been talking about giants a lot. Let's talk about this story of Saint Christopher. Okay, because Saint Christopher was actually a giant, and I say giant. I think it was somewhere between 7 to 9 feet tall. But that's what we hear is the average height of today's Dogman sightings, 7 to 9 feet tall. That's what I hear all the time. But Saint Christopher, this fella is depicted all over with a dog head. He's the saint. The dog-headed saint.
Well, actually, his story begins with Cynocephaly. He was a Cynocephalian, and he was in the Roman army. He was inducted into the Roman army like that, and supposedly he converted to Christianity. And when he did, he was baptized, and that changed him into a regular person. That's the
Oh,
story
wow.
of St. Christopher. So up until that point in time, he existed with a dog's head, supposedly, until he converted to Christianity and got baptized.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, there is the story behind him too. Let's see. I got my notes. What was his name, Dennis? Was it Reprobus? Reprobus? Is that his name before he was Saint Christopher?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So for people who are not familiar with the story, he actually was sainted after he carried baby Jesus across a river.
That photo you just showed, that is actually Jesus Christ meeting some dog-headed people.
Wow.
I don't know what the story is behind that, but that is interesting to note. That's who that is in that picture. That's Jesus Christ talking to some dog-headed people.
Yeah, that's wow that would have been even artwork put out there.
Well, I think that goes back to the supposed time when Jesus was supposedly traveling. I think he went supposedly to Britain because his uncle Josephus, owned a copper mine or something in Britain, and he supposedly traveled in his younger years with him. That's a legend that supposedly Christ actually went to Britain, and that was supposedly where there's a big history of dog-headed people in Ireland and Scotland as well. As a matter of fact, you touched on that with the Arthurian legend, and that's supposedly where I think that picture depicts the young Christ meeting the dog-headed people in Britain, kind of a thing.
Wow. Well, that's super cool. Okay, I was trying to see if I had any more pictures of that. I have so many pictures of the dog-headed men throughout history. Okay, and I was trying to find pictures of King Arthur with the dog-headed battle, but there's not a whole lot of information that I could find on this. Okay, why it seemed to be such a huge battle in a huge story, but there's not a whole lot of information on it, Dennis. But people do seem to talk about it a bit, and it is quoted in some literature. Okay, there are references to this in some literature. So,
well, actually, I think Arthur had a big battle around Edinburgh with the dog-headed people, and his knight, who became his knight, Bedivere, one of his knights, and Sir Gawain was the other one. That went over to the side of Arthur during that battle. There were different kings that were fighting, but some people in the battle were dog-headed people. Absolutely, supposedly.
Okay, I have this one picture. I'm only going to show it for a second. It's art, okay? And if you really pay attention to what it looks like, what they're doing, it's actually dog-headed men. Let's just say dressing a human, if y'all know what I mean. Okay, which would align with what some of these, writers had talked about. People who had taken accounts of the dog-headed people. I mean, that one dog man is riding a camel, it appears, and they've got humans. Mm-hmm. Humans are for dinner that night, let's just say. All right.
That's another interesting thing, and since you brought that up, Jessica, that when you hear the depictions of these dog people, except for like that battle we just mentioned, they're usually pretty nice guys. They don't bother you. They kind of, they're not, messing with you that way. You have to wonder about that. Why because people like dogs, and they figured, well, your dog wouldn't turn on you, or be mean to you. That might be part of it, but that is interesting to note that they weren't depicted as bad guys that much. They were like, we're doing okay. You don't bother us, we don't bother you, kind of a thing. That was what was going on with that. That's strange too.
Yeah, there's another explorer, Dennis, I think his name was John Mandeville, who also wrote, this is around sometime in the 1300s. He wrote that he had encountered dog-headed men. He said they were intelligent, reasonable, but they ate their prisoners of war. He also mentioned that they were devout. So I'm assuming that means religious, right? So, but he said they were good, fair, but they had hound heads. They worshipped an ox for a god, Dennis. Each had a gold or silver ox on their forehead, like an ornament. And yeah, this is somewhere off the islands of India. Okay, somewhere off like a little archipelago, like an island south of India.
Well, there is a connection with that. You do hear mention a lot about these people being on an island. Although some of them were depicted as living in the hills of India. There is that, but the Greeks talked about an island that these dog-headed people supposedly lived on. That's kind of an interesting connection too. But here's the way they looked at them, Jessica. In my book, this is the way they kind of treated them. They're like sort of like barbarians. They're kind of people we don't mess with. They're dog-headed people. They're not like our kind, you know. And that was kind of the way they looked at it. We leave them alone, you know, kind of a thing. Don't bother them, and they maybe won't bother us. But dogs got to eat too, okay? So it may be that they might eat people from time to time. If you wandered in their camp, you might not come back out. But like I said, they had almost like an ambiguous look at them, that they just done, you know, like say they're dog-headed people. Okay, they're like us. They just happen to have dog heads, so leave them alone, kind of thing. But it's interesting though that's what strikes me as so strange about all this. They just took this for granted as being completely real to them. So they must have had some kind of evidence that they went by to really, you know. Of course, we do know that down through history, there have been a lot of beliefs that turned out to be very erroneous. There was, I think, the kingdom of Prester John. I don't know if you've ever heard that. Prester John was supposed to be this very benevolent king that ruled in a land far off, and he ruled a paradise almost. People kept talking about Prester John did this, he does this. He was almost like, you know, a Christ-like figure in a way. And they considered his kingdom almost like heaven on earth. And yet he never truly existed. It was a fable. It was just a story told, you know. So you have to wonder about the Dogman thing. Is that part of that kind of fable kind of a thing, you know? We do know they've been mentioned. Here's the interesting thing about the Dogman thing, and you got to tag this. It's not just mentioned by one certain people. You run into this all over the world. And that's the interesting part of this. That makes me believe it's a little bit more than a fable somehow or another, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all grew up listening to fairy tales about the big bad wolf. Okay, the big bad wolf. I was reading the other day. This is so grim. Let's just call it grim. That actually in some versions of Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf and Little Red Riding Hood both eat the grandma together. Isn't that weird, Dennis? I never heard that before, but we grew up hearing that.
That is a werewolf story. The Little Red Riding Hood is a werewolf story, okay? And of course, at the end, in the real fairy tale, he ends up eating grandma and Little Red Riding Hood, okay? The wolf wins in the end. I always felt bad for the wolf. The wolf gets a bad shake on these things, you know. I always kind of look at his perspective from it too. But that's an interesting thing. We look upon the wolf as a wild beast that will destroy you, and yet most of the time, real wolves, like the Dogmen, they'll leave you alone rather than bother you. And why they got such a bad reputation, you know, is strange. But I think sometimes we just look for something to pick on, you know, as an example. Hey, don't be like that, or don't do that, or be afraid of that. I think we do that to our own desertion sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Well, what really struck me was that the reports, what I was reading was that they actually didn't have a terrible reputation because you could actually do trade with them and communicate with them. And they had their own communities. But Christopher Columbus came in, okay, and it kind of reminded me of, you hear that Christopher Columbus came to America, to the North America here, and that's it. And I hate to say this, but like the indigenous people were looked at and spoken of as savages, just like he's talking about how he's the one that gave dogmen and the dog-headed men the reputation of being savages. So it's all Christopher Columbus's fault, I guess. I don't know.
Well, that would be kind of like you and me stepping off a bus into a town full of dog-headed people, okay? If they don't eat us and don't kill us, maybe we could get along with them. We could buy their souvenirs and all that till we get back on the bus and leave. That's maybe the way that, Christopher Columbus and some of these would deal with that. You say, well, if they don't attack us and they're not bad guys, maybe we won't do that to them. The conquistadors didn't feel that way about it, though. They were out to conquer and get as much gold as possible and didn't care how they went about it. But they were not explorers like Christopher Columbus and Marco Polo and stuff like that. In that respect, they were conquerors. They went out to conquer.
Yeah.
Although they did a little exploring on the side, that wasn't their main objective. Okay, put it that way. But I think if the conquistadors had run into the dog-headed people, they probably would have wiped them out in that way, because like these dog-headed people that they talk about are not very aggressive in a lot of these stories that they tell about. They're not mean,
Yeah, just don't get caught by one, because they will eat you. I mean, if you're a prisoner of war, so having prisoner of war means that they were fighting other factions during the day. Okay, back in the day, if they had prisoners of war, so and if King Arthur fought them, what happened to them? Here's an interesting little tidbit. I was given a blind remote viewing target last week by my friend Bryce and my new friend Hillis. And I went on their show last week, or this week, actually. I think it was on Monday. They aired it, but it turned out to be the lost continent of Mu. And it was really interesting. Like, it's just like Atlantis. Where did this civilization go? Where did this continent go? I had some very interesting data on that. If you guys want to watch that, please go. You can find it in my community tab. Okay, here on YouTube and on my social media sites, it's there. But if full continents have disappeared, Dennis, full civilizations have disappeared over the centuries, it'd be easy, I guess, for whole communities and civilizations of dog-headed men to disappear too.
Well, Jesse and I've formulated a theory over the years, having studied a lot about the Fae and a lot of these other things. And I think the Fae were, to me, in my own book, my own opinion, were connected with Atlantis and Mu and places like that. And I believe at one time there was this very highly advanced civilization. But I think that the other peoples that were around them were very suspicious of these people, very superstitious about them, and were very wary of them. And I think they may have made war on some of these people because of that. You're not, like I said about the dog-headed men, you're not our kind. If you're not our kind, then you're our enemy. That's just the way humanity's always looked at it. And I believe that these people, like the Atlanteans and the people of Mu, and maybe some of these other places, had to go underground to survive, because a lot of these civilizations that they shared the above ground with turned against them and were very warlike against them. And they had lost, perhaps during natural disasters or whatever the situation may have been, had lost a lot of their technology, so they were at a very weak point. I think a lot of them may have considered going underground, definitely, to escape and survive, and to maybe try to revive their empires or their way of life one day. And it would not surprise me if there were a race of such beings as dogmen like that, and they were like outcasts in the human race, and the human race would probably hunt them to extinction, or if they were smart, they would go like the other guys underground.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of cryptids ended up too, because those are the perfect places to survive. You and I know that most of these warm-blooded mammals cannot survive underwater. That's not going to work. But look at the perfect hiding place is underground. And that would not surprise me a bit And that may have been the fate of the dog-headed race
Mhm.
as well, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, okay, the Theseus, that Greek writer that wrote about the dog-headed men back in around 400 BC, said that they live in caves, they sleep on the ground, and
Mhm.
so they seemed a little less civilized than the regular humans that were roaming around. And they lived anywhere from 170 to 200 years, when the average lifespan for a human back there was no more than about 40 years old. So these things were, I mean, they were anomalous in my opinion. I mean, but to them, they were just, or just, they're just there. They're
That's what
dog-headed men.
some writers have said, that caves are natural housing projects. Okay, that's just the way
Yeah.
that goes. That would be where you would go, because not only do they afford you the hideability thing of it that you can hide, but it also it's already made for you. You don't have to worry about constructing it, and it is a good fortification when you look at it. So a cave is kind of winning all the way around when you look at it that way. So that's why I think these certain peoples may have gone underground for that very purpose. And when you hear about these things, just like you said there about these dogmen being in caves and all that, or the fae being underground, and all these other supposes, even the reptilians going underground, all this other stuff, that wouldn't surprise me a bit.
Oh yeah. Me too, Dennis. I 100% agree with you on that. And I did want to bring up Maureen, the girl in her gong, did make a comment about a cautionary tale, and I do, yeah, a lot of those fairy tales, they're all cautionary tales. A lot of them are cautionary tales,
Mm-hmm.
but that made me think. That's what Columbus was doing, and all these some of the explorers that were saying that the dogmen were savages. It was to scare people, to put a
Oh
little
yeah.
fear into people, to not explore where he had gone, or maybe to keep people away from some of these areas, maybe for the resources. Maybe he had a
But
monopoly on the resources there.
that's very much like their attitude would have been that way. Like don't mess with them. Be very cautious. Be very careful dealing with them, because you are, like I said, they're not our kind of a thing. That's the way they looked at it, and that was the same thing with the Fae and all the rest of these that we're talking about. They would have been very leery, very wary of these. They would have been very suspicious of these, and you can't blame them. I mean, if you meet a dog-headed person, yeah, when you think about it a minute, that's not normal, and you're going to be very cautious about how you deal with them. That would be the natural thing to do. Absolutely, I can see where they're coming from on that. But here's what strikes me as so strange. I have to say it again. The normalcy of this to them was very weird. Hey, yeah, they're dog-headed people, so what? That strikes me as very strange that people had that attitude about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Patrick, thanks for being here. Patrick says, I think Christopher Columbus embellished his stories to make himself sound better to the royalty at the time. And that's true. I mean, what better way to say, well, I defeated a bunch of savage,
Well, he
cannibalistic dogmen. I mean, that makes for a good story. It makes for some more funding, I'm sure.
he may have been a drama mama, because he probably wanted to impress the king of Spain to send him out on another expedition. Okay, if you come back with some wild stuff and maybe some gold and maybe some prisoners or whatever you come back with, you're impressing the king. Okay, he's your money pot. That's what you gotta work with. And that's the way these explorers did. They were financed. They were not rich guys. They had to have financiers, and so I could kind of see why he would embellish some things. Absolutely. Maybe he went overboard with it. He's a sailor anyway. So he probably went overboard with it a little bit. But you got to wonder where they're getting this stuff at. Like I said, everything has an origin to it. Even myths and legends, they have a foundation of truth, whatever it may be. And that is one telltale sign. And when it starts popping up all over the world in different cultures, hundreds, thousands of miles apart from each other, that have no connection, you got to say, what's going on with that?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the origins, I can't imagine what it would have been like back then to be a soldier going into battle with your full armor on, with King Arthur, and running into an entire army of dog-headed men. Okay, because we hear today, I mean, I've heard reports. I know we got Patrick from the NADP, the North American Dogman Project, is in here, and I've had Jody on the show, who's the head of that organization, who's talked about taking reports of modern day dogmen being seen working with military.
You could kind of see the Knights, Jessica, sitting around after the battle saying, yeah, we ran into some dogmen, but we took care of them, kind of a macho thing, you know. But to me, the interesting thing is they just took it all in stride, you know, that it was part of reality. I mean, you know, that's the weird thing about all of this stuff. Where the heck does that come from? And why is it like that? It's almost like you and I running into somebody with two heads. That's an extraordinary thing. We wouldn't take that in stride. We'd say, hey, I want to know more about that. Where's this guy with two heads here, you know? Well, that's the way it goes with the dog head kind of a thing, you know? And here's what gets me about the story of St. Christopher. Okay. They put him in the Roman army with a dog head. He had a dog. He was what, about 9 feet tall with a dog head. They put him in the Roman army.
Wow.
Was that normal? You have to ask that question. Did that happen a lot? You know? Now the Roman army was known. The Roman army was known to have or employ barbarians, people that or mercenaries. Really, we would call them mercenaries today. To do the heavy fighting for them. Okay, they would do that. But there again, you know, dog-headed people, if the Roman army ran into a bunch of dog-headed people, would that be a bunch of good fresh recruits? You know, you have to wonder about that.
Yeah, that's true. Moon at Noon has a really interesting point here, because you know dogs like to dig. Okay, and they were giants. I mean, if Saint Christopher was a giant, I think a lot of people back then were giants, especially compared to us today. Moon at Noon says, "Who dug all the underground cities? It wasn't us." What do you think? Do you think there could be a connection, Dennis, between the dog-headed men, the dog-headed people, and digging out the underground cities?
Possibility. Dogs do have an affinity for the ground. Now, St. Christopher is connected with water, actually, more than anything else, because his story is that he would, you know, as a good guy, he would tote you across the water, the stream or whatever, on his back. And one day, supposedly, and this is when he had the dog head now, okay? This is before he got converted. He was toting somebody across the river, and they started getting heavier and heavier with each step he took. And finally, he looks back, and it's actually Christ who he is toting across the river. And Christ says, well, Christopher, you know, don't you think it's time to, you know, straighten yourself out here, you know? And that's when he supposedly got converted. And as soon as he was baptized, he started looking like a normal person. After that, that's his story. He's connected with water more so than with the ground. But dogs do have I had a dog one time, a German Shepherd, that could dig you the best holes you would ever see.
I have one.
That was his bed. You know, you have a German Shepherd. You know what I'm talking about. They love to dig. Oh yeah, and that's just an affinity. I think though, here's the thing about dogs and digging: they smell things underground. Whether it's an old bone or whatever the situation, they're very curious. They gotta dig it up. They gotta go for it. It might be something good to eat, you know. That's the way they look at it. But I think a lot of these cave systems were probably already there. I think, and like we've talked about this before, and I have heard many different sources say this world is honeycombed with these tunnels and caves. Whether it's natural or man-made or what. And I have heard, you know, we've talked about the domes and all that some of these areas were already dug out when they got there. They didn't have to construct it. So, yeah, you have to wonder if some of this is man-made or artificial. Who did that? You know?
Well, no matter what, I do believe, I know Brown Dwarf's in the chat today. Hey, Brown. Saying, I've been watching, he and I have talked about the hidden history of the United States. I mean, just all over the world with the old world fairs and stuff like that. And the cities being founded and the possibility of there being some kind of a mud flood that wiped a lot of stuff out and covered everything in mud. I mean, that's just something I need to look, I need to do a show on the mud flood, actually. But
that's the
things
connection. That's the connection with these mounds. A lot of these mounds.
Oh, yeah.
Jessica, absolutely. We know there was a civilization before the indigenous peoples were here. We just don't know anything about it. It's very unknown stuff. I'm gonna say this, and there is this theory, and I have to wonder about it sometimes, that this world that we live on, of course, being far older than we imagine, has seen the rise and fall of many civilizations before our prehistory. There could have been skyscrapers once upon a time on this planet. Not just because it's like there is a very strange passage in the Bible that says, if you think something is new, no, it is of olden times, which was before. That's a very interesting statement. In other words, if you think you're coming up with something new, somebody else has already done that. You know?
Yeah.
And as a writer, I know that to be a fact. For true, if you think you come up with a plot on something, somebody else has already thought about it. But anyway, you gotta wonder about that, you know. And maybe would these dog-headed people be the remnants of a previous civilization that once ruled this planet?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at too. Is like a lot of the things were already here, and if you look at a lot of the buildings, like old world structured buildings that are all over the United States, they say founded. They weren't built; they were founded. It's like they've been repurposed. So it's like, well, how do we even know how old our civilizations are at this point? It's all skewed.
That's like finding these 3 or 4 million year old screwdrivers embedded in rock and nails. Where that's coming from? You know what I'm saying? Embedded in rock. And I have dug up a lot of stuff in my time. Okay. When I was a kid, I was sort of like an amateur archaeologist. I was digging holes all the time. Anyway, I dug myself in a lot of trouble sometimes. But anyway, the thing is, you find some very strange objects. A lot of times they should not be there. You know, we call them out of place objects. They should not be there. And you have to wonder about that. Is that what really is an explanation for some of this stuff? Even they have found gears and mechanisms millions of years old. Who did that? Where did it come from? I believe without a doubt our history stretches far, far, far back than we really, really, truly realize.
It does. The Smithsonian didn't do a perfect job of covering everything up. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah.
They tried. They're trying. And I'm not blaming them. I'm not saying that. I mean, it's my friend Bryce says she mixes up the words and says Smithsonian and stuff like that, because I don't know. Sometimes videos will get flagged if you talk about it too much. But yeah, there's just been a big cover up, including the dog-headed men. But we have people like, I just saw Patrick left another comment with the NADP. I have not seen the Facebook page. I haven't been on Facebook to scroll today, but I will check it out to see what kind of event the North American Dogman Project has coming up. Thank you, Patrick. I'll check that out for sure. But I mean, the fact that we have a North American Dogman Project, Dennis, that says a lot, because there are enough dogman sightings, enough dogman encounters, enough dogman reports. That's dog-headed men, right? Well, that we have an organization over it.
Let me say this about that, and I know this is kind of getting off subject, but just a little bit. But there is that history, just like what we're talking about here, of that hybrid thing. Now, look, that does not occur in nature, not normal nature, unless something manipulates it. Okay, you do not have hybrids. You don't see half man and half zebra walking around. Okay, I mean, right. You just don't see these things unless something. I'm not saying it's impossible. Science will tell you hybridization between species is impossible. I don't believe that. I believe anything's possible if you want to try it hard enough. But I believe this is not a natural order of things. Okay. And you got to look, and that's what I've said a lot of times about, since you brought that up, I'm a member of the NCPD too. Okay. Since you bring up Dogman, and that's what I was told a lot of people about this, that should not be a natural occurring animal out there in the woods. Okay. So what's the story on that? Because it shouldn't be there. Just like dog-headed people, that is not a natural order of things. Okay. You do not have frogs walking around with bird heads. You do not have this transfers between species in nature. Okay. What's going on with that? Something had to manipulate it. Something had to change its very nature somehow or another, whether that was an intelligence behind it or whatever the situation. And I think that goes with the original Dogman that we talk about. I believe he has a very strange. I can see. Look, put it this way: I can see Bigfoot, which I have seen with my own eyes, and I know without a doubt he exists. Okay, I can see him being part of natural nature. Okay, I could see that, but not a dog man or not a dog-headed person either. That's strange. Very strange.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of genetic manipulation going on, in my opinion. I mean, I think even humans have been genetically modified. We are currently being genetically modified right now, just in the foods that we're eating and stuff that have chemicals in it.
I believe there are certain forces in this world, Jessica, that are really screwing around with stuff that they don't need to be screwing around with. Okay. That's just the way these things work, though. And I believe they're doing this because they are the enemies of the true creation of things. Okay. Put it that way. And I believe and some people, of course, are assisting them with this. Okay. That's an unfortunate aspect of it all. Okay. It's one thing. Look at it this way. It's one thing that outside forces are against us and our enemies or whatever the situation may be, but it's another thing when our own people are helping them. And that's what bugs me about the hybrid thing going on. They're doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. What are the reasons why they're doing it? They're very nefarious. They're not good reasons.
Yeah. Control, some kind of control. It all boils down to control every time. And it's just controlling humanity, controlling the information, controlling perception, controlling everything. And there's always some sort of an agenda.
Controlling our very fate, our very destiny as a race of people, of beings. That's what these guys are up to. And that's not good. No matter which way you look at it, I can't see anything good in that. I can't see them as being good guys. Definitely not.
Right. Well, you have to wonder why are we not taught about all of these strange dog-headed men in our history books in our schools? Man, that would have been so much more exciting had I gone to history class in elementary school, junior high, and high school and was taught about the dog-headed civilizations or the blemmies and the unicorns and the dragons. I was about to say dinosaurs. I learned about the dinosaurs, but not the dragons. Those are all things of fairy tales and mythology.
The unicorns mentioned in the Bible, by the way. Here's the interesting thing about all that, Jessica, and that's the way science, and like I've talked about this before, science is wearing those blinders again, just like you mentioned the Smithsonian earlier. They've got a certain set of ways they want to do everything. If anything goes against the grain of what they're out for, they don't want to mess with it. And here's what they'll tell you about the dog-headed people or anything else for that matter that they don't want to believe in or they don't want anything to do with. Oh, it's just a myth. It's just a misrepresentation of something else, or it's people making up some trying. Here's what they'll say. I've heard this many times. They're just trying to understand in the wrong way. That's where you get all this stuff at. And that's why I said earlier, okay, some myths are warnings and some legends are true, but they don't want you to know that. And that rankles me. That kind of, gets under my skin because they're hiding the truth, the real history of what's out there, and that's not good. I don't like that.
Well, we're getting to uncover it though. And to me, that's exciting. And I think that's the beginning of the change. Okay. And I think things are changing. I don't think that they're ever going to put this in history books for our public school systems. I just don't. Not anytime soon. But I think a lot more people who can are homeschooling their kids. I'd like to do that. Okay. I might be doing that in the near future. It just depends. But
well, you've often heard that history is written by the victorious people, the people that win. Actually, I think history is written by the system, whatever that
them.
system is in place. I think that's what's going on with that. And science, let us never forget, science is part of that system. Okay, and what we're dealing against is a system, a systematic kind of a system that systematically hides stuff from us or misconstrues things, just like you and I were taught when we were kids. Oh, the world's been explored. We know everything about it. There's nothing else to do. That was the biggest lie they ever fed us, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one of them. That's just one of the lies that they gave us. To me, that's the thing about it. And that's what's so good about shows like yours and these other podcasts, trying to uncover what may be the real truth, okay? The truth is a glorious, wonderful thing as long as it is not hidden and covered up.
That's right. That's right. Damien, that's a cute comment. I like that. Unless you graduated from Hogwarts, then you learn all the cryptid truths. Okay. So you learn, or unless you're the child of the cryptid huntress. And I tell you what, my kid knows all about cryptids, and he's out there searching for them too. And he knows more than I do about some of them. Okay. And I'm learning from him every day. And so it's important that we do teach our children some of this stuff, and just open their minds, keep their minds open, keep them always searching for the truth, just like we are. I think that's important, and just know to discern. Okay, and
When I first had my Bigfoot sighting, I went around telling people about it. Oh, you wouldn't believe this. It's real, I mean, I saw it. I actually experienced it. You would not believe how many people were like giving me the side eye. What's wrong with you? Nope. People do not want to believe this because I think like that system has over time put them in this rut that they're in of unbelieving things, or not having that open mind that they need to understand. I'm going to tell you what, if you close your mind off to this universe around us, you have really done yourself one of the biggest disfavors you could ever do, because you have limited not only your horizons, but your very existence.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we're going to continue to keep putting this information out. I mean, that's why I love bringing you on the show, Dennis, because you have such a wonderful perspective on things, and especially the cryptids. And you as well as I both know that Bigfoot's real. We've experienced demonic encounters and ghosts and other cryptids, all sorts of weird stuff out there. So we know this stuff exists, and so it's really great for us to have these conversations about it. And I understand. I mean, I didn't go public for 10 years about being a
Well,
Bigfoot researcher because I know how people can react to that.
I'll tell you a rule I've always lived by my own self personally. There's a great big difference between believing and knowing. Okay.
You're right.
I don't want to just believe, I want to know. Okay. And there are certain things I know without a doubt that exist. But once you find that out, and like I've said this before many times, and it is a question that still haunts you. It haunts you just like it haunts me and anybody else who has been touched or has known these supernatural and paranormal stuff and all this stuff. We know without a doubt, if this is real that you've experienced, if that is real, what else is out there? What else is real? And it opens such a wide possibilities to you that it's mind staggering in a way. Okay, what else is out there? What else could be real? If Bigfoot exists, I got to ask you, Jessica, what else does?
Yeah.
Or if Dogman is real, what else is out there? If there are really dog-headed people, or once were in this world, what else could be there? We don't need to stop at just the one single question. We have many
Yeah.
questions before us.
I know. question everything, friends. Okay, you'll question everything, and anything that you're shown, taught, even what Dennis and I talk about, question it. Okay, question everything, and do your own digging on it. And we don't make your own. I'm really big on saying go with your gut, what feels right to you, and especially when it comes to teaching your kids and stuff too, and opening them up to some of this information. And we don't want the kids being scared that there's Bigfoots running around the woods, because they're gigantic and they can be scary. But I would have loved to have known for a fact that Bigfoots existed when I was a kid. But that's also the beauty of it too, because it's a mystery. And it's like Scooby-Doo. It's like we get to unravel the mystery ourselves. And that's what I've done. That's what I've done with my life. Okay. Yeah. I became, Daphne and Thelma all rolled into one.
The interesting thing, Jesse, I'm an old monster hunter from way back. I was telling somebody this the other day. I was a monster kid. Okay, when I was a little kid, I loved monster movies. Okay, that was me. I watched. My teachers used to get on to me for watching monster movies. What doesn't give you nightmares? Oh no, I love them. But anyway, here's the interesting thing. Okay, I grew up on all that, and then found out, and this was like the icing on the cake. Okay, I found out that monsters are real. They're not just make believe. They are really real. And I can tell people that they are real. Some of them I know for sure absolutely are real. And that's the interesting thing about this universe. Okay. The mysteries first will draw you to it. The mystery is what allures you to it. But once you solve the mystery, that makes it that's the icing on your cake. That's it. That's what really tops it off. That's the cherry on your ice cream. Okay. To me, that makes it worthwhile. That makes the long haul worthwhile.
Yeah, it does. Well, it's like in my case, I found out that Bigfoot was real. I had my own experiences with Bigfoot, and now I'm off to even bigger, scarier things. Okay, it was the gateway drug. Okay. That's what Bigfoot was, because now I'm out there hunting for dogmen and stuff. Like I'm actually out there with a team of guys that we have gone out. We were just in the Alabama woods, stalking dogmen. Okay. And I'm not going to hurt them, y'all. Okay. I'm not going to hurt them. I promise. But we're just out there trying to find them.
Well, when I first experienced Bigfoot, I saw him from a distance 2 or 3 times. From way into the trees, I could see him, but could not see it very clearly enough. And that's what was killing me. I said, I got to keep this up until I can actually see this really good, 100%, undeniably see it. And that happened. I was lucky, okay, in that respect. Some people look for this all their lives and never see it. And we have to understand that goes on and where people are coming from in their perspective. They've never seen it. So that makes it that much harder for them to believe it. Okay. But like I said earlier, believing is believing. I'd rather know. I want to know. When I saw demonic things, I went to understand what that was. I saw what I saw. It was undeniable. And then I had that fire lit under me to understand what it was and experience it more that way. That's the way all this stuff is. So if you see a dog-headed man, you're definitely going to want to know more. I don't know how you wouldn't want to know more about it. You would want to experience it more, But some people are that way, though, Jessica. Some people just shut it down. Oh, I don't want to go there. That's it.
Oh, yeah.
They're scared of it, They stop in the wrong place.
And I don't blame them. It's not for everybody. Okay, it's not for what I do is not for everybody. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't recommend anybody do it unless you're super adventurous and you're really into the outdoors and cryptids and like hunters and stuff. Yeah, because it's not. I literally don't take my son out there and we do like hardcore research, out there. Because it is very dangerous. Okay, it is. But it's what I do. That's why I'm here talking about it, so y'all don't have to do it. Okay. Yeah. I think one of my good friends, Matt Delphine, says
people that's never experienced that just can't understand it. Okay. Until it comes home for them, As we have a saying in the South, when the chickens come home, when the chickens go to roost. unless it comes home to them, they don't understand where we're coming from. So, but I can see their perspective on that as well and understand it to a certain extent. But some people are just, it just rocks their boat. They're not going to mess with it. They say, I don't want to go there. I want to go there.
Yeah, my good friend Matthew Delph, the badass monster hunter, he says he has a little quote. He says, "Have y'all ever seen a monster?" And when people say no, he says, "Well, you're welcome. You're welcome," because he's taking care of all the monsters. He says, so it's good fun. I have a really good time with the guys I go out and do Bigfoot research with and stuff. Everybody's a hoot. But yeah, and I saw that brown dwarf. Brown dwarf said that he's more like Shaggy. Okay, so we'll have to go out and do some mystery hunting together, I guess you can call it. Brown dwarf. Don's asking, have I heard of the bat squatch that actually looks like a flying dogman near Mount St. Helens in Washington State? I have heard of it before. That's something that I should remote view one day. Yeah.
Let me say this at the end of the day, okay? When it comes to bat squatch and all these other things that may be out there, okay? At the end of the day, I have to say this. The real monsters are us, more so than anything else. Those are the ones we have to watch out for, definitely. The ones that are us, they're worse than I'd rather go run into bat squatch, okay? Because especially in law enforcement, I've seen them worse. I've seen those monsters, those human monsters, and they're far worse than Bigfoot or anything else to me, than the way they do. That's another thing. But here's one thing you got to always watch out if you're the monster hunter, okay?
Okay.
And here's the one thing you must always be careful of. You don't become the monster. You don't become what you're hunting. Okay, you have to watch out for that. The way you do it. Because you can become the monster at the end, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah. We don't want to be the monsters for sure. And I know Neil, Castle Dude Neil. Hey, Neil, thanks for being here. Neil said that he sees a monster every day when he looks in the mirror, he said. So, Neil, you're not a monster, though. You're a good dude. Okay, Castle Dude. Thank you. Don's asking, have I heard of the water cryptid in Georgia called the Altamaha in the Altamaha River? Yes, I have. I have never experienced it. But yeah, that would actually be a good trip. It'd be a really cool trip. Don, I don't know where you live. You maybe, I think you know Donnie, I think, with Standing Goats, if I'm not mistaken. And he's down in North Florida, I think. So I don't know if that's near there, if you're from there. Maybe we can meet up and go do some Altamaha hunting.
Let me throw one more thing at you right quick, okay? This is going to be a zinger for you. Okay. I have read reports of Dogman. Now I'm talking about the Dogman that, we've always talked about. I have heard reports of some of these dogmen being seen wearing furs. Okay. Could they not possibly, maybe some of those be the dog-headed men? You'd have to wonder about that because the dog-headed men were also described as wearing furs.
Yeah.
But I have actually heard several accounts of dogmen being seen wearing furs. Well, fur that were different from the fur of their bodies, in other words. Okay. What's with that? What's going on with that? You have to wonder about that as well.
Yeah. I guess they're just different. They're different types of dog-headed men, because you hear about the dog-headed men. It's like, well, is that what a dogman is today? Yeah, I think so. But they had more man-like legs, which some people say that's more werewolfish. So I don't know. There's just a whole lot of different categories and stuff. But I mean, some people say that there's just dogmen or dogmen. Werewolves are categorized with that. I think I was talking with Caleb, Jade, who said that they're actually they're the same. They're of the same bloodline, but werewolves and dogmen are just two separate. They've branched out of the bloodline.
The thing about werewolves, I've done a lot of study on werewolves. Okay, fascinating creature. One of my favorite cryptids, of course, of all time, is the werewolf. The interesting thing about the werewolf, Jessica, it would not surprise me if it showed up wearing something because it has the mind of a man. Okay, it's still got a human mind there. Okay, and look how much we humans are attached to our clothes. Okay, and how much, and I'm not talking about just women. Okay,
You
Men are
gotta
just bad.
wear
Okay.
underwear at
Uh,
least.
it was attached to the clothes. Okay.
Right.
That would not surprise me if you have a werewolf walked up wearing pants or something. How about to say, yeah, okay, that's reasonable to think about. Um,
Modest.
Also, if some of these things are very primitive, like Dogman or the dog-headed people, and etc., or even the werewolf, could wear things not because they need to wear them. You understand? But it's a symbolic thing, like for them. Like you've heard about dog men being seen wearing feathers. You know what's going on with
Right.
that? It is a symbolic thing. You've got some kind of an intelligent creature using these as a symbolic thing for them, or maybe some kind of a ritualistic thing, or whatever the situation is. I could see dog-headed men doing that.
Mhm.
If that was the case, absolutely.
Yeah, Cryptiville's been in the chat. Hey, Cryptiville, he's one of my mods. Y'all know Mark. He's been on my show a couple of times and came on to talk about his encounter near the Land Between the Lakes with the dogman with the painted face. It looked as though it had camouflage, like white paint smeared down
Yeah.
his face.
They would have gotten that. They would have gotten something like that from the indigenous peoples,
Mhm.
who would take the dyes and do this on the face and make the marks, across there. Absolutely, I could see that happening. Put it this way: look, we are all of us being creatures, whether we're humans or whatever the situation. We learn by example. We watch and we learn. Even animals do this. Look at your dog. The things he learns from you. Okay, by just watching you. These animals are out there watching us. We have to be kind of very curious about us, or very fixated on us in many ways. And I've heard that about Bigfoot. They tend to be very curious about us. I could see them, coming away with something like that from us. And even seeing us wear clothes might make them want to try that, or feathers or whatever the situation. Yeah, I can see that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
gives them more of a human aspect for sure, and that seems to be what these dog-headed men had back centuries ago. They were wearing clothes. They even had jewelry on their heads. They wore like gold and silver oxes on their foreheads as jewelry. What do you think they were worshiping? What was this ox,
Well,
Dennis?
look at the Egyptian gods, all of them, Anubis, Osiris, the whole works. They're all wearing clothes, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, they all, they got some kind of clothing on. Because
yeah,
what? They're half human. You got to remember that. There's a human part to them as well. Uh, we have that thing about clothes because not only is it a fashion thing, we had to wear clothes for protection. Our skins, we didn't have fur. We had skin that had to be protected either in from heat or cold. Okay, you would think people running around in the desert would not have very many clothes on, but you go out in the desert, Jessica. You gotta put clothes on, or the sun will burn you to a crisp. The clothes are protection. And look at that. That's very civilized looking when you think about it. Look how very well dressed those dog headed guys are.
I mean, they have royalty there. That looks like a king and his servants potentially, and they all have. See, when I was thinking of an ox, I thought it was like a little piece of jewelry on their forehead, but these are full out hats with a full size, not a full size
Mhm.
ox, okay, but a little ox. That's kind of big. I just realized that's what they had on their heads. Those are the ox that they worshipped. They said,
Well, that kind of shows you no matter how strange they look, they have that part of humanity to them. They're still
"Yeah,
like us in that respect, although they may look different than us. They have
yeah,
those similar aspects. Look at there. There's just two dog-headed guys sitting around talking. Those look like werewolves, by the way. They got a lot of hair on them. But they're not. They're actually dogs because wolves do not have ears like that. Okay. But
yeah,
um, you have a lot of those stories in Ireland and places like that. These people being the Cynocephalias like that. Um, that's strange. Now, those are dogs because the ears give them away. That's the one thing, and I've had a lot of people ask me that over the years. Was that a dog man or a werewolf I saw, or what was it? I said, well, look, you got to go by the basic description. That's why it's so very important when we do interviews and get descriptions from people that we be as accurate as possible, as quickly as possible, because the memories can play tricks on you. Memories are very infallible things. Okay, you can remember things. And here's the weird thing, Justin: you can remember things that never really happened to you. That's the way the human mind works. Okay, it can be a dream you once had, and you think it really happened. But that's the way it gets in your mind. I call them mind worms. They get down in your mind and they stay there for no reason. But anyway, that's why it's very important. We need to be very meticulous about interviews about people who have had sightings of these things. What kind of ears did it have? What kind of a snout did it have? What kind of teeth? What was the color of his eyes? You've got to be very specific. You take a look at the dogmen. They don't look like werewolves. They look like men with dog heads.
Yeah.
There's a big difference there, okay, when you think about it.
Yeah, especially wearing full clothes and an ox on your head. Okay, I'm so confused. I'm not confused. I'm just curious about the ox, and what god was that? Like, what they did that for worship purposes, for religious purposes, from what I was reading.
One of the big ancient gods that was worshipped was an ox. It was one of the representation of life to a certain extent. Fertility. It is a big fertility thing, the ox. And also, it's another one like the dragon. It's a power symbol. Okay. So they would have had something like that. If you ran into a bunch of dog-headed guys, you would think, well, they're kind of like us. They probably have a religion too. You know, they have a religious thing going on, a spiritual thing going on. So they would worship different gods and stuff, you know, absolutely. But the ox is one that goes way back, goes back to the Israelites and everything else. And the ancient Egyptians, there is an Egyptian god that, you know, with the head of the bull, with the disc that hangs down on his sword. That goes way back. So there might be sort of an Egyptian connection with these dog-headed guys. You never know.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. Poncho's the word. Hey, Poncho. He wants to know, has Dennis known any type of braided hair on Bigfoot or Dogman? And before you answer that, I have to say that I have a cousin who does artwork with Bigfoot, and he's actually consulted with M.K. Davis on the Patterson Gimlin film, and he determined there's a braid in her hair. Okay, a braid.
Kind of braid.
Patty had a braid.
I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of that consistently. Even Bigfoot having braids, and also Dogman being described as the braids with the feathers, and like you said, the war paint kind of a thing. That, you know, it would not surprise me a bit if their hair is long enough. Now the Bigfoot I saw, and is the one I can talk about. Okay, he had long. His hair was hanging down off of his arm, about maybe, I would say, at least 8 inches long. You could braid hair like that, definitely, if you wanted to. Here's another thing about Bigfoot. Are they very much like apes? And you and I both know apes sit around picking each other's lice off and eating it. They're very meticulous about how they do it. But actually, you can say, oh, how disgusting that is, okay? But it's nature's way of cleaning each other, you know, and keeping parasites off and all that. So these things would probably do that for each other. They would pick the parasite. You know, you and I both know how the ticks love you when you go out in the woods, okay? They really love me too. And they would be doing that to each other, you know, just like you and I would. If you and I went out in the woods, we'd be getting ticks off each other. Hey, there's a tick on you there, Jessica. Get that off. So that would be what would be going on with them too. I mean, you know, if they have any kind of a social thing going on, you know.
Oh yeah, I was covered in ticks when I came out of the woods in Alabama. I actually had, after I washed my hair, I shampooed my hair when I got home and scrubbed my body down to make sure I had no ticks. I was laying down in bed that night and I had a tick that crawled out onto my forehead from my hair. So no matter how good you scrub your hair, there could still be a tick hiding in there.
what's so smart about the ticks is those little suckers can lay down so flat that you can run your fingers over them and not even feel them.
That's
Sometimes,
right. They're flat.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Until they get full and then they get nasty and you can pop them and they explode and they're gross. So I don't recommend doing that, y'all. Don't do it. Okay. But I've had to pull one off my dog before that was really gross. So yeah, ticks and dogmen. I'm sure they have a problem with ticks. But I know I had a problem with ticks out when we were hunting or let's say researching. I'm just gonna say researching dogmen. We were researching dogman. Hunting sounds rough. I know, y'all. I'm not out there to hurt anything. I promise. But but yeah, the ticks. Okay. Hey, Renee. I see Renee in here today. Hey, he says many older verbal accounts relating to dogmen and cave painting is during the time when dire wolves were still here. Many stories refer to dogmen living in tribes, and all four here is based in fact. Ooh, it's based on fact. Interesting.
Man, that's interesting. I think even Bigfoot and Dogman that we are familiar with may be in tribes as well. Let me say this, okay? Very much like the regular wolf, and I have studied wolves for a long, long time. Fascinating creatures. They have a family unit. They have a social community thing going on. Okay, wolves. Okay, without a doubt, these other things would do the same way, and dogmen would definitely, dog-headed men would be that way as well. There would definitely be some kind, because you got to remember this: survival is so much easier when you have a larger group of people than it is when you're alone. Okay, when you are alone, you got only you to depend upon, and that's it. If you fail, then you die. That's the way that goes. But if you've got a community backing you up with support, you have a much better chance of survival. That's just nature's way of continuing the species, making sure it survives and does what it does. That's the natural order of selection here going on.
Mm-hmm.
Wolves are just the same way. I think wolves have a tribe. The indigenous people of the United States, especially, used to say that wolves are a nation, and they act like that. They almost like people to that extent.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, it's best to have a community of competent people around you. But when you get in a group of incompetent people who are going to affect you, maybe sometimes it is better to be a lone wolf. I'm just saying. It just depends. But for the majority, to survive as a species, yes, you would definitely need a group and a community for sure. Yeah, especially packables. There's nothing, I mean, there's a lot of things that are scary, but I was going to say there's nothing scarier than a pack of wolves coming after you, or even a pack of coyote. That's something that we have to watch for when we're out in the field. We have a lot of coyotes.
A lot of social people that study the social orders and stuff say that may be how the family unit began itself. You didn't just have children walk off and leave them. You kept them around because, hey, they would eventually be very helpful to you. Okay, in that respect, they would help you survive too. The bigger the family unit, the better your chance at survival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Renee, that's a great point. Renee says, in reality, there are dogmen that have been lab creations. So we are dealing with two distinct paths. Okay, two distinctive paths. That's 100% right. And even with this remote viewing stuff that I've done, and we've, in regard to the giant of Kandahar, I do believe that those soldiers were going in to get a sample for cloning purposes for a giant. We hear about this dogman breeding program. We hear about, I mean, even the LBL, I think that those things were being held, whatever attacked that family was let out to feed, according to my remote viewing data. Okay, so these things are being, today, we do have dogmen, I do believe, that are being lab made, that are being held in facilities. I don't know where those facilities are exactly. I have an idea. And they're being let out occasionally to feed, because guess what? We hear from history, like Renee said, we have to look through historical accounts to understand what's going on today. And yes, they were cannibals. They ate each other, but they also ate humans. And they're still doing that to this day. So beware. But don't live in fear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of this hybridization stuff has been going on for a long, long, long time. And I think it has its very nefarious purposes to it. And like I said, I'm sure the governments are definitely having a stake in that. I'm sure they've bought some stock in it. Absolutely. And, but yeah, we are, I talked about this the other day. We are lower down on the food chain than you would think. Okay.
Oh, I
You
know.
can find that out in the woods if you ever run into a bear or a mountain lion in the wrong way. You will find out very quickly where you're at on the food chain. Okay. Uh, and you have to wonder about this. But the interesting thing, though, Jessica, about dogs, and dogs are a fascinating thing in history. And like I said, we are the creators of most of them, okay, because we bred them for different jobs. I have actually seen, I want you to think about this a moment. I've actually seen bird dogs out in the field by the position of their tail. Tell you how many quail are in a bush
Wow.
just
Really?
by smelling it, just by smell now. And they can
Wow.
and then count and tell you how many quail that they found.
Wow. That's smart. Very smart.
Yeah,
Well, dogs are
very
smart.
smart. So if you ran into a race of dog-headed people, I don't think you're going to be running into some dumb guys here. Okay, I think they would be very smart, very much like dogs are in that respect. I think they would definitely be respected, or better be respected, because they
Yeah,
would definitely be a lot smarter than you think they would be.
for sure. Now, if you guys want to check out dog-headed men on rock carving sites, Renee says the Wadi Madandush is just one rock carving site featuring dog-headed men scattered throughout Libya's Masak, which is a plateau region. So y'all
I've
go
heard
check
of
that
that.
out.
Yeah.
That means that
Well,
there have been dog-headed men in Libya. That's in
a lot of
Africa.
the ancient deities and stuff were depicted that way, very much like the Egyptian gods. You had look at Dagon that we were talking about the other day. Dagon is half reptile and half fish. You got this hybridization going on. It's been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. You got this mix up between species.
Mhm.
Absolutely. What is that? That's weird, but that seems to be a part of our humanity that we know that these things exist in that way and they're there. And like I said, it's sort of a cautionary thing, you know. Be very careful. It'd be like me warning you just when you go out in the woods, Jess. Watch out for something that's half some bear and half cat or something, because that's out of the ordinary. It might be more dangerous than a regular one is. So that's just the way people were looking at things, okay? And they could see their deities reflecting that in the way they looked.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. Renee says the classical Cynocephaly source is Herodotus. Writing between 450 and 420 BC, he located dog-headed men in Libya. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that's what he just mentioned earlier. Home
Yeah.
of the Messic dog-headed carvings. And
That
I
was
got
sort
another
of
one
like
here.
for ancient
Yeah.
people, that would have been like the end of the world. I mean, the very end, the drop off there, whatever. Uh, that would have been way out there. And that was like, we were talking about Prester John earlier. It was someplace way off that you would probably never get to, that you heard about these things, and that's why the maps were drawn and all that other stuff. You didn't. Here's the thing about back in those days. Okay, you were very lucky. Think about this a moment. That if you ever made it 20 or 30 miles from where you were born, that's just the way that went. You didn't travel. You didn't get on a plane and go anywhere. That was it. And so when you hear about these things, definitely it was a communal thing going on here. It was a community thing. And this was someplace far off that you're never going to reach. You could come up with some wild stuff. Pretty much so.
Yes, that's right. And, even to this day, I mean, we have to go way out to go do our Bigfoot research and our Dogman research. It is way off the beaten path, miles. I mean, I'm talking about we had to hike miles into the woods to set up camp where the guys had a potential Dogman encounter out there. It was a long way, but it's still in. I mean, we're talking about like national forests and stuff. Okay, so this is land. It's not like we traveled to some far off island, that took us a year to get there by boat. This is our nation's, our state's federal land, federally owned land and stuff.
There's an old,
which is also sus.
There's an old saying, you'll never know how long 20 miles is until you walk it.
Oh my God. I walked several miles. It sucked. Yeah. With my backpack and the 120 degree weather. Yeah, it sucked in the woods, climbing uphill every way. Well, Renee has another comment. It was, I think I'm pronouncing it right. Herodotus, who first associated the dog-headed men with the headless men, the Acephalai, and the Cyclopses. And I think you and I talked about Cyclops.
They even had a race of men described as having no head, but their mouths in the stomach, kind of thing.
The blemmies.
Those weird stuff. But I think a lot of these things may have been tales. You remember that old thing about you could line people up and whisper in somebody's ear, and by the time it got down to the end of the line, it was something completely different than what the original thing whispered. I think that was going on a lot too. Somebody would tell somebody something and so on. And my cousin's friend that knows somebody told me this. Okay. Kind of a thing. You kind of got stuff mixed up a lot, I'm sure, but that's the interesting thing about the dog-headed people. It kind of stays consistent.
It does.
Yeah,
it does. And now we have them here today. We do. And, yeah, man, we've had some great comments today. Wonderful chat. And wow. I mean, I know I'm a few minutes behind on the comments today, but I wanted to thank everybody for being here and really contributing a lot in the chat today. In addition to what Dennis and I have been talking about, Renee says, on these mountains, there live men with the heads of dogs whose clothing is the skin of wild beasts. They speak no language but bark like dogs in this manner, make themselves understood by each other. Yeah, we had mentioned that earlier today. And Dennis, you did talk about them wearing the skins of other animals. I'm just glad they're not wearing the skins of humans. Okay. All right. This is for entertainment purposes only.
It's interesting thing about human skin, Jessica. It makes a good leather. Okay.
Oh God, that's what I know. It's horrible. It's horrible. But yeah. I've heard shoe. I'm not going to go there. I don't want to get in trouble here on YouTube.
Very famous, very nefarious and evil books that are bound in human skin with tongues, human tongues for bookmarks.
Ew.
I won't get into that, but anyway, human skin can be just as pliable as leather if you treat it the right way. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm just glad like I said, they're wearing other animal. Maybe they're wearing other dogmen skins. Who knows? But super interesting topic today, Dennis. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today and going over all of this history, the world history of the dog-headed men today on this show. This has been so much. This has been a lot of fun, actually. And I know you have a big old show coming up tonight over on your channel. Tell me about it a little bit. Tell the audience what you have going on.
Oh, yes, tonight at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8:00 Central, on Hunting the Shadows, we have a very special guest. That my good friend Carroll Fountain and I will be interviewing Mr. Dacre Stoker, the great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker, the man who wrote Dracula. So it should be a very interesting, pointed evening. Absolutely, definitely. And I'm looking forward to that. And, of course, now Friday night will be Paranormal Point of View at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then also on Monday nights with my good friend Carroll Fountain again, we will be doing the Road Less Travel. That's at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, too. And I can be reached if you want to share anything with me. You have a story you want to relate to me, whatever the situation, you can reach me at denniswcarroll.com or Gmail me at denniswcarroll@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Yes, Dennis, I will be there tonight. I'll be there with bells on. And this is going to be right up your alley. And Carroll's too. I'm super excited because we just talked about vampires recently. and it's gotten to be one of my favorite topics. Actually, all these topics are my favorite, but that's one of my favorites for sure. And you're the best at it, Dennis, for sure. So I look forward to that. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts on the dog-headed men before we say goodbye today?
Well, if I ever run into any of them, wherever that might be, I hope I've got a nice big juicy bone I can throw out there, see what happens. Okay, just in case. Maybe I kind of lead them off. But I think without a doubt that there's something to this. Okay, like I said, the stories are very consistent, worldwide and all that. I think we need to kind of investigate more into what may be the possible origin of dog-headed people.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So you guys stay on the lookout for dog-headed men and women. There are women too, y'all. Okay, and children out there, puppies, pups, whatever you want to call them. That's that's a whole other topic right there. Are they pups or are they what are they? I guess they're pups. But just be on the lookout. I mean, we would not have the North American Dogman Project if we didn't have dogmen out there. I'm just saying. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. Amy, thank you. That's a sweet compliment to Dennis. Amy says, thank you for making yourself available for questions or feedback to anything paranormal, Dennis. And I thank you too, Dennis. You are the best. And I really do appreciate you. All right, you guys, please come back and see me. I'll be back tomorrow night here on the channel with the remote viewing show. I'm not sure. I have several topics that I'll be choosing from. Okay, so I'll let you know what that is tonight or tomorrow morning. All right, I'll see you back here, Dennis. We'll see you tomorrow night or tonight. We'll see you tonight on your channel with Carroll, and we're going to be diving into vampires tonight, y'all. Okay. Y'all have a great day. I'm sending all my love and light. Keep your head on a swivel. Everybody stay safe out there. And thank you so much to everybody who tuned in today. All my moderators, all my channel members, all my Patreon members. Dennis, I'll see you soon. Bye, y'all.